And you. Well, I'm really, okay. Thank you so much for being here today, Cindy. This is actually this is going to be a pre-podcast.
Exciting.
Yeah. So episode,
Nice.
I guess I should say. So
Love it.
thank
Thanks
you.
for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. First of all, I would like to introduce you as one of my good friends and one of our Women Rocking Business leaders. You have a very large, vast knowledge. Yeah, you really do. I mean, from being an attorney to having an amazing business now where you help women with the art of feminine negotiation, and you just launched your most recent ebook. So there's a whole bunch that we could talk about.
Lots going on. Yes.
Lots.
And what I would, the intro.
Yeah. What I would love to talk about is the art of feminine negotiation and how you have helped me even stand up for myself a little bit more. And just, to be able to get what you want on your own terms and in a way that feels comfortable with you. So
beautiful. Well, thank you. It's something close to my heart. So I'm always happy to talk about that.
And would you mind telling us a little bit about your history as an attorney and how you are where you are now? Sure. Can we start with that? Your story.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, my background, I guess. Well, I sort of, I grew up in a low rental apartment.
Now I lost your audio.
You can't hear me?
Okay, now it's back.
You're good? Okay, that's odd. So sorry about that. I'll come closer to the mic just in case. I grew up in a low rental apartment complex. I used to always say I came from nothing, and I have switched that sort of mindset shift as well, because obviously I came from a family with a lot of love in that, but we definitely lived on the other side of the tracks. And as I think often happens when you come from that kind of background, I was pretty driven, right? Like right from high school to university to law school, always striving for those sort of straight A's. And I remember in law school, I took a negotiation course. And had I known what the course was about, I probably wouldn't have taken it, to be honest, because we ended up basically bargaining for our marks. So over the course of the year in a pretty competitive law school, we got a series of simulated negotiation exercises, and we'd get paired off randomly with other people in the class by the instructor. And then you had to get a negotiated settlement in the 1 hour class. If you didn't get a settlement, you got a 0. And whoever got the highest settlement got the highest marks. So you're really basically negotiating for your marks. And I raised that. I ended up winning virtually every simulated negotiation that year. And I say it not by way of bragging, but because of the epiphany that came much later, to my chagrin, about that. But after that law school course, which I'll come back to, I ended up getting into the actual practice of law, which was pretty male dominated. Even when I was there, they were starting to get more and more women in law school, but still really male dominated actually out in practice. And I did social justice where my clients were mostly trade unions. So again, I was almost always for the longest time the only woman in the room. So this real male dominated energy. And as you can imagine, I felt like in that environment, and again, it's a limiting belief I think a lot of women have, if I want to have my voice heard, especially as a 20-something fresh face coming right out of law school, if I want to be taken seriously, if I want to have my voice heard, I'm going to really need to bring it, right? I need to bring that masculine energy. I need to take no prisoners approach. And I did build up a very successful reputation as a super effective negotiator. But, my clients called me Barracuda, which, I'm now embarrassed to say, in my naivete at the time, like I took that as a big compliment. And for the longest time had a much more sort of aggressive approach. And, but it starts to, that kind of approach takes a toll on you, right? And it's like this little toxic poison that then creeps into everything. It starts affecting your professional relationships. Then it starts affecting your personal relationships. And for me, I had this, call it an epiphany moment. It'll seem very sort of anticlimactic probably to a lot of your listeners, but I think because I'd had a number of warnings and it was an accumulation. We started late and I got, married in my mid-30s and had 3 kids in 3 years and made up for lost time. And when my boy was, he was, a late teenager, all of a sudden we were having this, I thought, discussion one day, and I could see his frustration. For God's sake, Mom, does every discussion with you have to be an argument that you win? And it doesn't sound like much, but I think because I already had been feeling the effects of that sort of toxic impact on my relationships and was already questioning where I was at, it was like somebody just ripped my heart out and held up a mirror for me. And I did not like what I saw. So that was this moment. And it was sort of in the wake of that, that I remembered back to that law school course. And I thought, you know what? I didn't approach those. I want every one of those negotiations not coming from that masculine place of energy, not coming from that take no prisoners approach. I came to every one of those simulated negotiations going, okay, we've only got an hour. There's got to be a great resolution here for both of us. What is it you need? What do you want? Like really working on building that rapport, building trust, being flexible in the moment to go, oh gosh, obviously this is tougher than I thought, or being able to move and be open to solutions. And I'd been sort of duped, if you will, into believing that to be a really effective negotiator, I had to come from a place of absolutely sort of leave nothing on the table. And I realized that simply wasn't true. And it was a game changer for me. And that was sort of the beginning of me then getting into creating this program and starting on a totally new track. So that's the history of how I got here, if you will.
Wow. I love that. And, I just want to say that you are truly a beautiful soul. You've helped not only just teach me about negotiations, but you've advocated for me. And I think that's how, when you started when we were on a retreat and you advocated for me, I'm like, wow, she's awesome. That was so easy. But just leaving those breadcrumbs, and teaching me how to do it little by little. I feel like I thought I was a good negotiator, but then I also realized that I was leaving things on the table, just little things.
Yeah. And it makes a difference. And I feel really passionately about it because I think there are these major myths, right? And, I hope it's okay to say on Facebook, I don't get you blocked here, but I always like to say, I like to bust the myth that you have to bust balls to be an effective negotiator, because I think most women in particular fall into one of two camps, right? They either believe that, to be really effective, as I did when I started the practice of law, you got to bring that masculine energy, that toughness carries the day, right? The person who talks the loudest and longest is the person who's going to come out on top of a negotiation. And so those women end up taking that approach. And there's this cost to that. As I said, for me, sort of personally, and I think most women, we lose touch with our feminine or vulnerability, which is actually our secret weapons, right? And the other camp are women who tend to shy away from negotiations, feeling like because they believe as well that that's what it means to be an effective negotiator. And they're like, I don't want that conflict. I'm not good at that. Right. I'm not great. I can't be a great an assertive, which we can talk about later. I could go on for ages about that. But you have these two camps of women, and there's a huge cost for both. And for me, I got really passionate about this because suddenly I realized all of life is a negotiation. Like really, when you think about it, whether you're negotiating with ourself, our first and most important negotiation, negotiating with your kids, with your intimate partner, with the local bank or insurance company or local contractor, or if you're negotiating multi-million or billion-dollar deals, all of life at some level is a negotiation. And it's the one skill we're not taught. So we are so ill-equipped to deal with probably one of the most important skill sets that we need. So I love sort of sharing this information and helping women leverage their power, through the art of feminine negotiation.
Well, I can't wait for you to get into the steps involved. If you could do that today, that would be amazing.
Absolutely.
I was just also thinking, like, along my journey, same thing. I'm in a very male dominated profession. When I went to chiropractic school, there was probably 1 in 5 were women, maybe 1 in 4. I know.
Wow.
Hot commodity. That's where I met my husband. But
well, you are a hot commodity.
Thank you. And there in chiropractic school, it just, you start losing a little bit. I feel like I probably lost a little bit of the sisterhood that comes with learning how also to be a negotiator and stand in your own space and value. So, it just over time, it erodes a little bit and a little bit and a little bit until you realize, wow, I've been really holding back on, my service to the world. Yeah. So I feel like it's so much further reaching than the word negotiation, right? How it can really affect you overall. So so,
and we get these warning signs along the way, I think too, Leah, right? Like when I think back now, like I talk about that conversation with Chase being hold this mirror up, but before that, I'd said we had 3 kids in 3 years, and our firstborn got diagnosed at 2 months old with a serious heart defect. And, I show up at the hospital again, I've got my own law firm at this point. And, I'm like, don't sugarcoat it. Let me know what we're dealing with. When we ended up at the hospital with her, which was shocking because my doctor told me at my 1 week and my 1 month and at the 2-month checkup, she was fine. You're being paranoid. And again, you talk about women's intuition and trusting that. I went and got a second opinion from a pediatrician, and within minutes, we're at the hospital for sick kids with her on life support. And I'm going like, what the hell just happened, right? So she had to have open heart surgery, and almost everything that could go wrong did. We were there for almost 3 months in critical care after her surgery. And like every day, I wasn't aware of it at the time, Leah, but every single day I was negotiating for her life in hundreds of ways, like every day. And you would have really thought if there was ever a time that I was going to bring that chest beating masculine energy when the stakes were, and yet again, I wasn't aware of it at the time, but in hindsight, I didn't approach those negotiations that way. I think that was my first chrysalis of my RFIT program, that Art of Feminine Negotiation. But it just came intuitively to me. And it wasn't until sadly, I'm embarrassed to say, it took me much longer after that to finally get the message fully downloaded. But every day in that hospital, I was working on building rapport with the doctors, with the nurses, with the administration, showing empathy for their position as well, having the flexibility in this really uncertain environment of being able to move and find what's the best solution, using those persuasive powers to get everybody on board so that Jade's best interest, my daughter's best interest was their top priority, right? Trusting that intuition in the face of everything screaming against it, just having that confidence to trust in your own intuition in that. So that, I think, really was probably one of those warning signs and the chrysalis long before it formed more intentionally in my mind about the Art of Feminine Negotiation. So,
wow. And she's all healthy now.
She is 23 and she still has a defective heart, but she has beaten all the odds. They told us she'd done multiple surgeries in her life, and knock on wood, she never has. So thank you.
Amazing. Well, let's talk about the RFIT program. Can you walk us through that? That's, I think, what a lot of people are going to be very interested in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when I keep referring to art, like my program is actually called the Art of Feminine Negotiation. And when I first started, like my transition from law actually didn't jump right into the Art of Feminine Negotiation. I still resisted it, believe it or not. I think because I was still seeing that sort of, well, that's too business, that's too masculine. I originally started the business called Women on Purpose because it was all about helping women rediscover their purpose, right? Their passion. Because as you know, as women, we so often do what's expected of us in life as opposed to following our real sort of passions or purpose. And then later, the idea about, you've got 30 years of negotiating experience. And that's when the pieces fell in place, that all of life is a negotiation. And oh my gosh, imagine the power if you can help leverage women to step into the full force of their feminine power through through feminine negotiation. And how it came about is when you think, I sat back after I had these sort of then epiphany about law school and epiphany about when Jade was in the hospital, and then looking at Chase and where I was at that stage. I'm like, okay, let's break down what are actually the elements that make and mark the most effective negotiators. And as I started sort of laying it out, and I'd studied negotiation and I've 30 years of practice. Yeah. So I've been exposed to some pretty high stakes, intense negotiations, and, being with some of the best and being at the, top of that game as well. And it suddenly struck me, there's sort of 6 main skill sets, and people break them down differently. But I think if you look at it, it's assertiveness, which I'll come back to. But so the AREFIT is just a simple mnemonic. Just an easy way for you to remember. Just think you are fit to be a great negotiator. So ARE, the R, FIT, fit. You are fit to be a great negotiator. The A is for assertiveness. The R is for rapport building. The E is for empathy. F for flexibility. I for intuition. And T for trust. And it suddenly struck me that those really are the key elements that make and mark the most effective negotiators. And that's when the light went off. Because if you think of it, Leah, and again, parking assertiveness for a moment, which we'll come back to, but if you went out and did a survey and asked, however many people you ask, whether rapport building, empathy, flexibility, intuition, and trust are feminine or masculine traits, the vast majority of people, hands down, would say they're feminine traits.
Oh, yeah.
And they're 5 out of 6 of the skills
Mm-hmm.
that you need to be a really effective negotiator are
Mm-hmm.
traits people think are feminine, and yet we don't use them. We fight to adopt a masculine model of negotiating, when if we actually stepped into, women use these skills every day in a
Mm-hmm.
myriad of ways. So again, for
Yep.
your viewers and your listeners out there, I guarantee you, whether you're facilitating a conflict or between your kids or in your relationships, you have already are using these skills. All you have to do is start bringing them with intention to your negotiations in life, and it is your secret weapons that you already have that skill set. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome.
And I don't know if you wanted me to speak about the assertive now,
Oh,
or
yeah, I do. Yeah.
okay. So I think part of the main misconception, the biggest myth about it, is that everybody assumes negotiation is all about having to be assertive. And in fact, I think most people, if they're honest, think it's about being aggressive. Aggressive
Mm-hmm.
and assertive are not the same thing. Cannot stress that enough. Assertiveness really is just coming from a place of knowledge. Assertiveness comes from confidence, and confidence comes from knowledge, and knowledge comes from preparation. So like in my programs, a lot of what we do are just really simple tools and tactics so that you can prepare really easily for any negotiation, frankly. And one of them is just bringing the RFIT model with intention to all of your negotiations. So right out of the gate, again, most women who believe that they're not comfortable or able to really be assertive without going to that masculine place, simply not true. That's based on a misconception about what assertiveness is. Again, assertiveness just comes from that confidence, which comes from knowledge, and that just comes from preparation, and you can do that. But also, if you think about advocacy, most
Mm-hmm.
women are less likely to advocate for themselves. We do
Mm-hmm.
everything for everyone else. But boy, don't say women aren't able to be assertive, because if we are advocating for somebody else, for a child or an aging parent, or frankly, anybody who would be considered sort of a vulnerable population, we bring it, right, Leah? I mean,
Yep.
you a little tip that I have to share. I call it the mama bear tip. And if you're in having to advocate for yourself on something, and it is, if you fall in one of those two camps, as I said, where you feel uncomfortable having to advocate for yourself, we all still have that little girl, or for the male listeners out there, that little boy inside us still, with all of those little girl or little boy hurts that we carry, those wounds that we carry our whole life. It affects our, all of our limiting beliefs come from them as well. So
Yes.
the next time you need to go self-advocate, just bring your mama bear, if you will, to
Mm-hmm.
advocate for that little girl, that little bear cub in you still. When you bring your mama bear to advocate for your own bear cub and almost distance yourself, then maybe you're going to be more likely to be able to show up and bring that assertiveness to the table, as well as your rapport building and empathy and flexibility and intuition and trust.
Nice. Well, and do you feel like, and that's a great tip for sure.
Thanks.
I really do believe once you come into parenthood,
Mm.
yes, you can advocate so much easier for someone else, even if it wasn't a skill that you had in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
Do you think that children, when you mention limiting beliefs or um, things that we kind of inherit from our parents, teachers,
Yeah.
preachers, all of that, do you
Yeah.
feel like this is what has been squashed in a lot of women as they are going through
Mm.
childhood? I'm
I
just
love
wondering
that.
too, like how, yeah.
I
Um,
love that question, Leah. And interesting, I never really thought of it in that way before. So thank you for sharing that, because I think that's a brilliant insight, because we do, one of the elements of my program as well, I call the 5 W's, right? And I also call those your 5 secret weapons, if you will, right? Um, I even did a little free ebook resource on it about your 5 secret weapons to more effective negotiating. And the 5 secret weapons are just that: who, what, where, when, why. And when you think about it, children, they drive people crazy by, they're always asking that why, wanting to get to that deeper why. But children also intuitively would know when. If you think back as a kid, when you really wanted something and you were going to have to ask your parents and you expected resistance, you knew to pick your timing, right? To get them. You didn't want them when they were in a bad mood. You didn't want when dad was just back from work or when they were doing whatever those triggers were. And on those occasions when we blew it, because we just got too excited, we didn't call it a timing issue or whatever, but we were just like, darn, I didn't time that right. But intuitively, we did have that ability to bring that passion and empathy, and kids, as kids, you're flexible all the time, right? So I love that. I think that's really insightful, that it gets sort of knocked out of us as we get so driven on our to-do lives in this to-do society where everything is outcome driven and present moment. And if you want to really become your best negotiator, you just got to let yourself get very intentional about some of this stuff. So
awesome. I love it. And I want to make sure that my children learn this growing up.
Absolutely.
And so that I don't squash their enthusiasm on being their best advocates as well.
And actually, you just hit on a point that's a real raw spot for me, because I see with so many women and I love that you're saying that, because we model for our kids. And again, particularly, I'll say this for your women listeners out there as well, because we have been conditioned to feel that less than so much. And I'm not judging, I get it. Like, really, it wasn't that long ago. I think one of the reasons we have such great skills on rapport building and empathy and intuition and building trust is because, when you think of it, we didn't have the right to vote for so long. We weren't even recognized as persons in the eyes of the law, right? I mean, we didn't have the right to own property. And so we were of necessity having to develop rapport building just as a survival tool, right? And so we have that skill set. And yet I think as women, that conditioning of being afraid to step into your feminine power, because, again, call it stem cell memory or whatever, but our predecessors were burned at the stakes when they stepped into their feminine power. But we tend to keep ourselves small, and we don't really step into that power, and we see ourselves as martyrs. So when you talk about parenting, as women, so often it's almost, so you remember that scene in Jaws where they're like showing their scars and putting up their thing. You think that's bad, I've got this.
Right.
And when women, as we get together, we often try it, and I don't think we're conscious of it. We try and outdo each other with that martyrdom, right? Like, I've got to be the super mom and the super career woman and the super this, and I'm so busy and I don't even have time to do this. And oh my God, you had time to get your nails done? Like, how luxurious, right? How indulgent, how absolute. And we don't want to be seen as indulgent or selfish or self-centered or whatever. And yet, when you think about modeling for our kids, and I often say this to the women in my coaching programs and to my clients, just take a step back and think about what you're modeling, not only for your daughter, but your sons. When you martyr your needs and you don't advocate for yourself, when you don't ask for what you want, when you're not prepared to step into your feminine power to be able to get what you deserve in life, what message are you sending your daughter? You're basically saying, as a woman, your needs are never going to be as important as any man in your life. And for our sons, we're basically saying, any partner you may have, any relationship with a woman that you may have, whether personally or professionally, those women's needs are actually never going to be important as yours. So really important point you raised, Leah, about that modeling for our kids, right?
I just got chills. Yeah. So true. And then what you were saying too about stem cells, but it literally is ingrained in our DNA. I mean, it's from generation to generation. So we pick up on these maybe habits or already ingrained in us some fear of being able to, and I keep saying advocate, but for ourselves, just because of exactly what you said. The way that we weren't able to vote. We were burned at the stake. We're getting kind of heavy into the feminism.
But even the studies show
it's true.
As early as kindergarten. I found it interesting where, like, young boys get their sense of social status. And when they've done studies on this, like observing behavior of young boys and young girls in kindergarten, young boys get their social status by bragging on themselves, right? Making themselves larger than life and beating their chest and, the whole big fish story. And they gain social status when they do that. And by contrast, young girls as early as kindergarten get shunned and excluded if they brag, if they're perceived as bragging. So as women, we don't want to be seen as the big B, and we sure don't want to be seen as bragging on ourselves. And so we keep ourselves small. So one of the exercises I do with my clients is to make them, I encourage everybody, frankly, to keep what I call a brag list. And for your listeners out there as well, literally start a journal and keep it by your bedside table and start by listing 25 things that you love about yourself. And you'll be shocked how hard that is for so many women to even really allow yourself to go there, to start listing things that you love about yourself. And add to it constantly, you know, things you like about yourself physically when you're being honest with it, when you're not self-deprecating. Oh, I hate and I'm guilty too. Oh, my hair's so stringy. I had this, my lips are too thin, right? So, but love on yourself and then continue to grow on that brag list, you know, things that you've accomplished, you know, nice things other people have said about you, nice things other people should have said about you. So really stepping out of that fear of being able to ask for what we want.
I just wrote that down to make sure I do it because I had forgotten, but that is awesome. Thank you for that tip.
Yeah.
And so true. So true. Okay. Love it. Do you want to talk about your ebook? Should we talk about that a little bit?
Sure. And I just thought too with the 5 W's, just to give a little context.
Let's do the 5 W's.
And because I sort of just threw it out there about talking about kids, but didn't really give you the context for how you can apply it in your own life as well. The 5 W's are just that very simple, that who, what, where, when, why. So just really bringing that, like the 2 things I would encourage you to bring are the R-FIT model. So again, whether it's in a professional, whether it's, you know, when you're hiring, whether it is, you know, in your personal relationship, just really thinking, and I would say hold the A, the assertive, on the back burner and start with intentionality about, okay, how can I build rapport in this relationship? The empathy piece, how can I put myself in the shoes of the other party, right? What is it they're wanting? What do they need out of this to be able to want? You're going to be able to come up with a creative solution that, at least to them, seems to be meeting their needs or beyond as well, right? And bringing that flexibility as well to the table, right? With intention about, if I come to a negotiation thinking I want this, and then, you know, you're come to a negotiation thinking you want this. In what I'll call the traditional, more masculine model, it's that winner, right? And even when people talk about a traditional win-win, they're often talking about some way to sort of split the baby. And even some really skilled mediators, professional mediators that I know, will say, I know I've done my job if everybody walks away unhappy. And I'm like, no. Skilled negotiators, when you're bringing that rapport and empathy and flexibility and intuition, if I think I want this and we both come with that approach, we'll end up with the solution somewhere up here, because then we're able to break out of that sort of traditional mindset and come up with more creative solutions that will exceed both of our expectations when you're open to it. And then you layer onto that the 5 W's, where you go, okay, who, what, where, when, why. And I'll start even backwards. So what's the why? When you're going into any negotiation, again, personally or professionally, what's my really deep why? Let's take money as the easiest, because everybody thinks, oh, well, money isn't about a why. Money is just about the money. Not true. Negotiations about money are almost never really just about the money. It's what that money represents for you, right? Is that money, be able to send your kid to a special camp that otherwise they couldn't afford? That'll be a game changer for them. Is it a much needed romantic weekend to rekindle your passion in your relationship, you know, with your significant other? Is it a status thing? Do I feel like I've never been enough? And it's a matter of me getting the respect that everybody has different meanings behind it. Is it going to get me that promotion I need? So figuring out what is your deep why. And normally I suggest go 7 layers deep, because whatever you think your first why is, then, you know, say whatever it is. Oh, it's because I need to get this contract. Then ask yourself, okay, why is it important for you to get this contract? Well, I need this contract so I can have whatever. Okay, and why is that important for you? Well, I want to, and sometimes it even gets down to, well, it's leaving a legacy for my kids, or it's about having freedom in my life to know that I have control over whatever. So find your deep why. And consider what the other person's why is as well. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing. There's a whole, and feel free as well. I've got a whole, sort of free ebook resources on my webpage about this. Feel free to check it out. But going through finding that deep why, right? Consider the who ought to be at the table. Who do you want to be? Who do you want to show up as in that negotiation? You know, I've made the mistake in personally when I came having a negotiation with my daughter. had I approached, I really wanted a particular outcome as the mother in this sort of role to immediately set things on in a way I never have had I been coaching one of my clients. So just really being cognizant about who you're showing up as, who ought to be in the negotiation, what are the issues on the table, what are the who, what, where, and where. Some conversations are best held in the bedroom. Some definitely should never take place in the bedroom. Do you want to have this conversation when you're at a firm retreat for work? Or is this a water cooler conversation? Is this a conversation you want at the bar when there's alcohol or not? So all of these different levels of that who, what, where, when, why can be a game changer in how you show up in your negotiations. So thank you for letting me go there.
No, I think I think everyone needed to hear that. I needed to hear that, because you do forget sometimes too, about the where, even as like, I don't want to have a conversation sometimes, even with just example, my husband and I own a practice together. So I don't want to have business conversations when he's walking out the door in the morning. I mean, it just isn't the right thing. Doesn't set my day off for success. So those are, better when we actually plan a meeting and we have a walk and talk. We've been doing those a lot lately. So because everyone's sitting down so much. Right. So I think that, I mean, sometimes we forget that the where is important as well, but 5W is very good, solid information that we can just easily use in our lives.
Yeah, thanks.
I like it a lot.
Yeah.
So tell us, and do you want to tell a little bit more about your program?
Or I'm fine if you're saying about I'm happy to chat about the ebooks, or I digress there. But
that's okay.
Yeah, no, I this is sort of a passion project of mine, because definitely my sort of signature program, if you will, is the Art of Feminine Negotiation, for sure, right? And that's, I think, a lot of the women who come, and it's not just about negotiating in the traditional way you would think, it's about those mindset shifts, right? So, and so much of becoming an effective negotiator is getting past those limiting beliefs that you've had, the myths that you've held about yourself and about how you show up. And one other element of the program is what I call no fear negotiating. And it's another acronym, that FEAR, we all have fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of the unknown. But we also, a lot of women aren't aware, we really carry that fear of success as well, that, we have these internal thermostats that when we start getting too successful, we find a way, if we're being really honest, to self-sabotage and end up holding ourselves back as well, right? So raising that awareness about your mindset, about where your focus is a really important element of the program. And so that no fear, no ego, not bringing ego to the table when you negotiate. Attachment, being too attached to your results as well. And reactivity, that's the R in the no fear as well. If we, tap into your deep why, bring the emotion to your negotiations, but don't be emotional. If you know what I mean, like don't let yourself be reactive, but definitely tap into that emotion you have. So with that by way of backdrop, I do regular Facebook Lives within my community as well. I try and offer lots and lots of free resources as well. So, not everybody has to join one of my programs to be able to access. I'm passionate about sharing the word. But when COVID hit, I got to say, I suddenly, at the beginning of March, it was like all of this fear and negativity and angst, right? I mean, you saw anxiety levels skyrocketing and depression skyrocketing. And I realized, again, this is all mindset stuff, right? And I do so much of this work in my programs for my, Women on Purpose and in my Art of Feminine Negotiation. I sort of just made this snap decision that I was going to go live every day while this lasted. And so I started doing Facebook Lives every day at like 9 a.m, just positivity, right? Like how to be able to shift from a place of fear to more powerful resilience, how to negotiate with yourself, to be able to see the opportunities that are out there, to be able to come from a place of powerful resilience, even, and especially, frankly, in the face of adversity like we were facing. And it seemed to really resonate and catch on, and people were starting to come just wanting that little dose of positivity, because the news was all about, everybody's counting the number of deaths and this fear that was all consuming. And then I thought, you know what, I need to get this down as a book and just get it out in the world. And again, it was more of a passion project. This isn't something I want to monetize or to be able to, I'm not looking to sell it. So I'm happy, and thank you for asking about it. It just launched this weekend. And again, happy to share the link with your group so they can access. And it's designed it's like really little short snippets. So if you've only got a couple of minutes to, maybe in the morning before you go, just read one little section. They're like, most of them are like less than a page long even. If you're getting ready for bed at night, just read again, just one or two little sections. Heck, when you're going to the bathroom, put it, print it off and read.
Good.
So just these little bite-sized ways to shift. The book's called Negotiate from Fear to Powerful Resilience. And it's like just about shining light in the dark, be the light that shines in the dark during these times of conflict. And at the time I wrote the book, it was pre the most recent sort of where we're seeing the race riots. And, to talk about the elephant in the room, but I do find, and my hope at least is that this book will help as well. It was originally written because of COVID, but I think it just offers in any adversity, when you're facing any kind of angst or fear or negativity that's out there, it's a way to find really simple coping skills. Some are simple exercises, some are just mindset shifts. And I feel really passionate about the potential impact it can have. So,
well, I'm very excited to read it. I downloaded it last night, so I'm
okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yay. Excited.
Yeah. Let me know what you think. Open to
of
constructive
course.
feedback.
Yeah.
So.
I will for sure. I think that's amazing. And that's actually posted a link to it on on my page. Sure. But I'm going to post a link in the group. I didn't post it in there.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, just during these times, I know, like you had said, you wrote it for COVID, but just on flipping through it, I thought it was perfect for now.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And it's something I wish we would teach our kids, right? Like when you talked about, like, imagine what a different world it would be if everybody approached life. Frankly, I think a lot of the problems that we're seeing in the world right now, like, we hear a lot about the rise of the feminine, and I actually do think it's time. And again, it's not a gender-based thing. This isn't about the rise of the feminine, like, oh, it's women's turn. It's none of that. Women, like you said, when you were in chiropractic, that you lost that sense of the sisterhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's balance. We all have masculine and feminine energies. We need that balance internally in our personal lives. And the world needs that balance of masculine and feminine. And I think our world has gotten so out of balance, which is why we're seeing these problems in the environment and in relationships breaking down in unprecedented ways before, because we're out of balance. So, I think there's this misconception that stepping into your feminine somehow means being weak. And the opposite is true. Right. There is nothing stronger than stepping into that feminine energy. And I just imagine what a different world it would be if both men and women tapped into the art of feminine negotiation, tapped into the power of that feminine persuasion, where imagine a world where instead of wanting to win all the time in every aspect, or coming from a competitive approach, if everybody, male and female, were able to tap in equally to that masculine and feminine energy and brought more of that rapport building and trust building and empathy and putting yourselves in the shoes of other people, so many of the problems that are plaguing the world today would start to evaporate. We'd be finding really beautiful resolutions, right?
Yep. And the collaboration over competition.
Yes. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a whole different mind. And it's such a simple mindset shift, right? When you let yourself be open to getting out of the sort of training, if you will. And let's face it, our current media doesn't help. Like, I'm dating myself here, but I think of growing up, like all of the Disney shows we watched or even our TV programs, the good guy always won, if you will, right? There was this, your word was your bond, and that. And now if you think about over the last quite some time, sort of The Sopranos was the first one I became aware of it. Maybe I'll go back and look, but almost all of the really top TV shows right now, the hit movies and TV shows, are where our protagonists are no longer the good guys, right? They're mobsters. They're trying to evade, and we're rooting for, you think even Breaking Bad, right? Like at first, totally Walter's sympathetic, but by the end, even when he's totally power hungry and he's not coming from any great, we're rooting for him over the FBI catching him, right? Same with The Sopranos. They're chopping people up in the meat grinder in the back, and we're like rooting for him to get it. So somehow we flipped and lost that. And that's where I think that masculine versus feminine has really out of balance. And we need to bring that back.
Sure. Good examples.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Cindy. Really appreciate you taking the time today to be here live, work through the technical issues that we had at the beginning.
Yeah, no, you're great. You're a superstar at this. So, and again, I'm happy with your group if they want, to access any of these resources. Pages www.womenonpurpose.ca. Don't forget it's the .ca. I'm up in Canada here, but all over. But womenonpurpose.ca. I've got free ebooks on the 5 secret weapons that we talked about, those 5 W's. So you can take a deeper dive in that and see how you can apply it both personally and professionally. And I give lots and lots of examples of all of the various elements of that. I've got a ebook resource on no fear negotiating as well, to take that deeper dive into how to really bring that no fear, no ego, no attachment, no reactivity. So again, lots of resource about how to rediscover your purpose and passion. Feel free. My blogs every week as well, weekly blogs on everything from negotiating by email, how to use silence effectively as a negotiation. So tons and tons of practical tools that you guys can use, all as free resources out there. So please do check in on that.
Sweet. I will definitely post it in the group. Well, or you can post. I'll do it for you. We got it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.